I have a big pleasure to have another guest, Mr. Wojciech Bońkowski.
Good evening.
Wojtek, for all the time you were here in my shoes.
Yes, I was.
And now at last we can focus on you. I planned it from the very beginning. Because you are a very complex personality in Chopinology. On the one hand, you are the specialist in Chopin's interpretations, in Chopin's editions. It was the issue you focused making your PhD. The reception of Chopin's music, and what a surprise, you are also the specialist in what Chopin ate and what he drank.
Yes, I did a study of his favorite foods and drinks that is now published as a lovely book by the Chopin Institute.
We can see here the cover of this book. We would like to publish it, and we will, in 3 language versions, in Polish, in English, in French. I think that the culture of eating and drinking in 19th century was very different than today.
Yes and no. I think there were many similarities. I was actually quite surprised when I did my research on this topic, how similar it was to what we do today. Even the Instagram existed in a similar way, because whenever Chopin had something nice to eat or drink during his travels, he would write a letter to his family, similarly to us when we now use the iPhone and send our friends, look what I just ate. So the food was slightly different, because the cuisine was still deeply rooted in the 18th century, especially in Poland. Paris was more modern, so what Chopin ate in France was more modern. But many things were completely unchanged, such as going to some nice restaurants to enjoy a good bottle of wine with some special food. And it was also a way of socializing that Chopin knew very well how to use to improve his social status as well.
There are some fragments in Chopin letters where he writes to his family about what he likes to eat. What he liked to eat when he was very young.
When he was young, he was, for example, a big fan of gingerbread. He reported from Toruń, which is a city that is still famous for this kind of biscuits or cakes, that he enjoyed them much more than all the tourist attractions in the city. He did enjoy hot chocolate. That was probably the only real love of his life. But it has to be said that Chopin was not very eloquent on his food and drink in his letters. Most of the texts that I quote in my book are actually indirect testimonies from his friends. Georges Sand actually left fairly lengthy fragments about food and drink, but Chopin, just a few remarks in his letters, and it makes them even more interesting because they are so few.
So, how did you find out what was Chopin's menu?
The inspiration for this research was actually fairly casual. I just researching another topic, I ran into a mention in one of Chopin's letters to Julian Fontana, his secretary in Paris, where Chopin asked him to get him some bottles of Tokaj wine. And I thought it was very, very interesting, because Tokaj wine was not very popular in France in that time. So it was a habit that Chopin probably brought from Poland, where this wine was much more popular. But it struck me that Chopin would be interested in such a mundane detail, like asking him his friend to get him some wine. And so from this I studied Chopin's favorite foods and drinks, and I reconstructed what he ate and what he enjoyed drinking from his letters, from the memoirs of his friends. Józef Brzowski left a few very interesting accounts. There's a very interesting passage in the Journal of Delacroix, Georges Sand, like I mentioned, and from there I could really reconstruct an entire context of this food and drink, up to actually recreating some real menus that we even served in one of the Warsaw's best restaurants, Tamka 43. We created a Chopin menu that we served with matching wines and also matching music.
Not only in Tamka, but during the Chopin competition, there is also such Chopin menu in Regent Hotel. And actually we were there with cameras, and
Yes.
We have some material about how the food of Chopin's time is prepared. Let's take a look maybe.
Chcieliśmy naszym gościom hotelowym dać jak największy wachlarz wyborów tego, co jadł Chopin za swojej kariery i za swojego życia. Dlatego stworzyliśmy zestaw menu na 10 kolejnych dni. Poza ostrygami dużym powodzeniem cieszyła się i cieszy się sarna. Przygotowaliśmy dla Państwa tatar z sarny z menu chopinowskiego. Chopin, muzyka klasyczna, to i jedzenie musi być klasyczne. Same produkty mówią za siebie, dziczyzna, dlatego postanowiłem wybrać dla Państwa tatar z sarny. Musimy przygotować filet z sarny, oczyścić go. Oczywiście można włożyć go w maszynkę i zepsuć mięso. Ja proponuję, żeby to było krojone nożem, drobną kosteczkę. Mamy skrojone mięso z sarny. Wszystkie te składniki będziemy mieszać razem. Plasterek pieczywa swojej roboty, domowego wypieku.
Do menu chopinowskiego zaproponowałem następujące pozycje. Będzie to foie gras, będzie to aromatyczna zupa z homara, będzie to także velouté z dzika. Mówimy tylko o przekąskach. W daniach głównych comber z jelenia, gotowana ryba w czerwonym winie. Jeśli mowa o deserach, znajduje się tam deser czekoladowy, tak zwana delicja przeze mnie, z czekolady, z lodami z Mazurka i pomarańczami, oraz rzecz, która odnosi się do tradycji staropolskiej, polewka piwna z płynnym żółtkiem i szafranem. Nie różni się, jeśli chodzi o składniki, których używam do przygotowania menu. Różnią się na pewno smaki, których ja mogę sobie tylko wyobrażać, jak te potrawy smakowały na początku XIX wieku. Dzisiejsze gotowanie jest zupełnie inne. Całe menu jest wolną moją interpretacją tego, co jadał Chopin. To są autorskie propozycje z wykorzystaniem nowoczesnych technik gotowania i szacunkiem dla produkcji.
It seems so tasty.
I think everybody's slightly hungry now. So these are just two examples of menus that I co-created with the chefs in Warsaw. One slightly simpler, just using typical ingredients from Chopin's times, such as game meat, but also seafood. And the other is a more creative menu. Of course, it's modern food, reinterpreted today by one of the leading chefs, but again inspired by some of the combinations of flavors that are typical for Chopin's times. So on one hand we have the old Polish cuisine, which was very much rooted in the 18th century, that had plenty of game meat, very spicy flavors. That was also very typical of Polish food at that time. And on the other hand, we have got the Parisian food or the French cooking of that time, which is a more bourgeois cuisine, which is some of the recipes that still exist today, such as marengo veal, and also typical delicacies that Chopin enjoyed in aristocratic salons or in the good restaurants such as foie gras or oysters. And we have this wonderful story narrated by his friend Józef Brzowski when they go, the three of them, Chopin, Brzowski and another friend, they go to one of Paris's most popular restaurants, Le Rocher de Cancale, which actually still exists today, so we can go there and actually have pretty much the same menu. And they order from the list, and actually Chopin orders from the list because he knows his food best. And so they have oysters and champagne and some other delicious dishes, and it seems so contemporary because it shows Chopin not as a musical genius somewhere in the stratosphere, but a man of flesh and blood, very, very close to us.
And he also liked wines. You mentioned Tokaj, but
Yes.
another wines were also of some importance in his life.
Of course, because there was little else to drink in those times. Remember, nobody drank water. You only drank water when you were ill. So the choice was, for a man of Chopin's social standing, the choice was between coffee, hot chocolate, or wine. So of course he enjoyed wine. He didn't have maybe a special taste for wine. He was not a wine connoisseur, but of course he could distinguish a good wine from a bad one. That was taught to him by his father, who was a Frenchman. Let's remember that. Georges Sand was also a lover of wine, and she had a big cellar in Nohant, so certainly they drank a few really good bottles there. But we know that he drank Bordeaux, which was red Bordeaux, which was one of the most popular wines in that time. Champagne all the time, any occasions, with food, without food. So again, this is a very contemporary link because Bordeaux and Champagne and Tokaj are wines that we drink today.
In your book, there are also some recipes from Nohant written by Georges Sand. I decided to prepare something like this. For example, there is something like a cake with white cheese.
Yes. Actually, most of the recipes were notated by Georges Sand's daughter and granddaughter. There's only one original recipe that was written by Georges, but it comes from a very interesting book which is called À la cuisine de Georges Sand, that basically assembles all the recipes of the Sand family, the women of the Sand family, over half a century. And it shows there is also a lot of continuity between the things that were written at the end of the 19th century and also in the time when Chopin was staying there, which is in the 1830s.
And at the end of the book, there is a menu, but these are not only dishes and not only wines, but there is also music.
It's an innovation that I proposed when we first experimented with this menu at the Tamka 43 restaurant. Of course, everybody knows that you match the dishes in a menu, the different courses, with wines. But I think it's also very interesting to match them with music that is related in the mood, but also in the circumstances when it was written with the dishes and the wines that we are tasting. And it creates, I would say, a larger whole that I think is fantastic.
And during the competition in the both places, Tamka and Regent, are the same menus?
They're not the same menus. The Regent Hotel had 3 menus that were rotating. There was one each week. Tamka is continuing with the Chopin-inspired menu, and it will run until the end of October. So whoever is still in Warsaw, you can go and taste and find out for yourself what Chopin actually enjoyed eating and drinking.
It is a very creative job, I think, to prepare such a food performance you did. What were the reasons that you chose this or that piece of music to this or that dish?
Partly by mood, because I think there are some foods that are very calm and lyrical, such as the spicy bread soup that the chef of Tamka was mentioning. So I matched this with a nocturne. There are other dishes such as game dishes, meat dishes that are a little bit more serious. So, for example, there I proposed to listen to a polonaise, but also the circumstances of Chopin's life are also a match. So, for example, one of the big inspirations for the menu was Majorca, where he stayed with Georges Sand, and they had some foods that were very exotic for them. And so we showed a dish that was inspired by this stay, which was a chocolate cake with a matching wine from Majorca, a red wine, but also one of the preludes that Chopin wrote in that period, because of course what he was eating and drinking subconsciously also influenced his mood. So when he was experiencing a feeling of novelty with the foods that he discovered in Majorca, surely that left a little mark in his music, I think.
Did you observe the reactions of guests in the restaurant during such psychophysical feast?
It's really interesting because usually in restaurants you have some music running in the background.
Yes.
You don't really pay much attention to this, but it's a sort of a nice background. But we showed music as a special part of the menu that you actually were expected to listen to. There were short pieces that were aired after the wine was served, so you could taste the wine listening to the music, but before the food arrived. And so you had to put a little bit of attention to listening to the music and also smelling and tasting the wine. And I think it's interesting because we know synesthetic feelings are important in music. At the end of the 19th century, Scriabin, for example, was a composer who loved matching colors with sounds, but also with aromas, with smells. Chopin wasn't really aware of those connections, but I think we can create a really interesting experience by actually doing it in our time.
Oh God, it seems to me that this book is a must-have of this season.
I think so.
My guest was Wojciech Bońkowski. Thank you very much.
Thank you.